This is IAQ Radio, Indoor Air Quality Radio, the voice of the indoor air quality industry, with your host, Radio Joe Hughes, and the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnick. And now, Radio Joe Hughes.
Good day and welcome to IAQ Radio Plus. This week is episode 770, and we welcome back Jeff May. This will be the first of our Life and Times interviews in 2026. Jeff is an IEQ pioneer and author with decades of experience helping solve IEQ issues. Before we get started, let's thank our sponsors. We could not do the show without them. And don't forget, after the show, you can continue the conversation on afterthoughts.iaqradio.com. IAQ Radio Association sponsors are the Institute for Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification, IICRC, a nonprofit standards development and certifying body for the cleaning and restoration industry at iicrc.org. The Restoration Industry Association, RIA, at restorationindustry.org. The Environmental Information Association, EIA, at eia-usa.org. IAQ Radio industry sponsors are Particles Plus at particlesplus.com, Tramex Meters at tramexmeters.com, EMSL Analytical Inc. at emsl.com.
And now you can win a cool prize. It's time for the IAQ Radio Trivia question. Be the first to correctly answer. Simply email your answer to czlotnick at cs.com. Or if listening live, just text your answer from your computer. And now, here's the Z-Man.
Hello, everyone. Here's today's IAQ Radio Trivia question. Name the EPA administrator who served twice during non-consecutive terms. Back to you, Joe.
All right. Jeff May is principal scientist of May Indoor Air Investigations and author of several books on indoor air quality, including My House is Killing Me and The Mold Survival Guide. Jeff has been investigating building problems in homes, schools, and offices for over 30 years. He's also got a Bachelor of Arts from Columbia College in Chemistry and an MA from Harvard University in Organic Chemistry. Welcome back, Jeff. Great to see you.
Thanks, Joe. Great to be back and honored to be one of the first people to be part of your new program.
Yeah, we're focusing on kind of the life and times of some of the industry pioneers and people that have really contributed a lot to this world, and you're definitely one of them. You're one of the first people. Actually, Cliff was a big advocate of yours because I think you've given him some tips over the years that he's really appreciated. And so it's great to have you here. Let's start a little bit with what you're doing currently, Jeff. Are you still out there doing indoor air quality work?
Yep, still doing pretty much the same, though I've slowed down a bit and I guess we're getting a lot of referrals now from pulmonologists, people with, really serious illnesses. I guess it's taken a while for this all to sort of take hold. But I think, allergists tend not to be that concerned about indoor air quality and about health of their patients. They want to just give them shots. And the pulmonologists get these people with life-threatening illnesses, many of which are known to be caused by indoor, environmental exposure, and so they're more likely to refer their patients.
Has that changed over the years?
Yeah, I would say so. Just because my reputation has sort of spread a little bit. I've given talks at some of the hospitals, and so people have heard of me.
I see. And I'll bet your books have helped that too. I mean, people have heard of you through your books.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you told me recently about a new method you were trying when evaluating HVAC systems. And I wanted, if you could take a minute to talk to our audience about that and tell us, you're still out there and, inventing and working on new processes. So tell our audience a little about what you're doing now.
Yeah, well, it's could be considered as somewhat risky, but I guess a lot of the biggest sources of air quality problems are often air conditioning, And if you often can't get to the coil, you can't see the inside of that unit. You don't know what the condition is. I mean, I always open them up if I can, but so what I've started doing is I have an air sampler at a supply duct, and then I tap on the air conditioning plenum. And you have to be careful because obviously, if there's a lot of mold there, you don't want to sicken anybody. So you can open a lot of windows, and then you can actually take the sample at the supply with the windows open. And if you just take an air sample at a supply without disturbing anything, you don't see mold, but if you disturb the surfaces a little bit, some of that mold gets into the air, and what you'll see often is chains of cladosporium or penicillium spores, and that's been released. So it's very, I mean, it's one way that I can use to get to it, and I just air the house out very well. It only takes a few minutes for all of that aerosol to get dispersed. It's risky, if you have people that are really sick, they can wear a mask or, get out for a few minutes. But there really is no other way to get a high idea of what's going on in that, around the air conditioning coil.
Hey, Jeff, have you ever thought of using a borescope to do that? They have some pretty inexpensive ones now that you can get for like $300, and there's a camera on it, and it even it moves. You can kind of
Right.
control it.
Yeah, no, I have two borescopes,
Right.
and a lot of times there's no hole to even get in,
Right.
so
What
there's
about
not.
making one? Or you think that's riskier than
Yeah, no, I don't. I'd never make a hole,
okay,
because you don't want to. That's too much too risky.
okay.
Now, I got a text question here, Jeff. What is that air sample? A spore trap air sample?
Yeah, well, I use the Burkhardt air sampler all the time, but basically it's just a spore trap. But it has to be right over the register, and it has to be one that's fairly close to the supply, to the unit itself, and then you can cover part of the supply with a book, so you get as much airflow as possible. But it's an untimed sample. Just do it a couple of minutes, really. Tap on the thing, and you get full of spores if there's
And
mold growing inside.
are you still doing? One of the things that impressed me about you early on was you were doing your own. You had your own microscope. You were doing a lot of sampling that because you were able to do that and then look at those samples yourself, and it didn't have to send them, label them, send them off to a lab, and wait for the results 3 days, and so on and so forth. Are you still doing that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think, it's a sending them off to a lab for analysis is a huge limitation to, interpreting what's going on. I don't remember now. There were two or three researchers. I think Richard, what was his name? Richardson, Larry. Yeah, I think they sent identical samples to different labs, and the results came back, and you couldn't even tell they were the same sample. One of them had a lot of basidiospores, the other one had a lot of penas spores, and so a lot of the labs aren't really that reliable, and all they're doing is they're looking for spores, and they're working quickly and they're clicking away. And the most important thing that none of the labs really report on, or maybe only one or two, is whether or not there are chains or clusters of mold spores. So let's say, a lot of people do an outdoor sample and compare it to an indoor sample. So let's say you find five individual penas spores outdoors, then you find, or let's say 10 outdoors and only five indoors, and you'd say, oh, that's half the concentration. But if the spores on the indoor sample are in a chain, there's actually there's a mold problem. You almost never see chains of spores in the outdoors. I think I've seen maybe twice a chain of three penas spores outdoors. But so the labs don't report really the most significant information that you can possibly have from your air sample.
I wonder if that's changed over the years or not, Jeff. I mean, you would think No, not really.
No, no, no,
Not to
no.
your
They
knowledge.
you can no. I have you don't. They have to have a separate category if it's a I think there may be one or two labs, or I guess the important thing for any of these IAQ people is you want to request, because some of them told me that if they request whether they're chains or clusters, that they would include that result, and that's absolutely key.
Good
Interesting.
point.
Cliff?
Thanks. Jeff, let's go back to the book. What was the background story,
Yeah, the
on,
background. It's interesting. One of my clients actually worked for Johns Hopkins University Press, and we were talking, and she said, "You should really submit a proposal." So Connie and I got stuck in traffic going to New York City to visit my my brother, and we were stuck in traffic for 5 hours on the expressway. And in that 5 hours, I just dictated all of these different ideas that I had for the book. And Connie, God bless her, she took shorthand and
oh, wow.
typing. And so she wrote the whole thing. So we outlined the entire book on that trip. And we sent in a proposal to Johns Hopkins University, and we never heard anything really for several months. And then finally in June they said, well, we'd like to see the book, and we didn't have a book. And so we rented a condo in Vermont, and we spent like 10 hours a day working like crazy. And we by September we had a book for them. So
What
it
year
was
is this, Jeff?
Oh, let's see. It came out, I can't remember anymore. I think it came out in 2000, so it would have been maybe 2018, 19, something like that. And the title of the book came from actually our one of the somebody left a phone message, and a woman was describing her house, and she ended with, "My house is killing me." So that's how we got the name of the book. And it
Well,
turned out she used to have forced hot air heat, and they put in baseboard heat, and then she had an addition put on. So she had, I think, forced hot water heat in the addition, but no ductwork from the old system. And when they took the old system out, they left all the grills in place, and she had a very moldy basement. So every part of the house was getting mold from the basement, except for that one room in the addition that didn't have a grill.
Did you or Connie have a problem too? Is that what kind of got you
Oh
interested
yeah,
in this? Yeah.
absolutely. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. So, I did I did home inspections for, quite a few years, and sort of transitioned slowly into the air quality business. And we had a kid with asthma, and I have a lot of allergies, and so I began to notice, problems that I was having in different environments. And actually I ended up having to wear a mask on a lot of home inspections, and the real estate agents started calling me the masked home inspector. And then after that, they called me Jeff Dismay, which I thought was wonderful. So,
now, weren't you a teacher before that?
I taught chemistry for many years, and I did graduate work at Harvard for 3 years, but I hated graduate school, so I started teaching, and I taught, as I said, about 7 years. And it was a private school. The classes were small, and the kids were very smart, so I loved it.
And then how did you go from teaching school into the home inspection?
It's a very strange like path that I took. So after I left teaching, I applied to medical school, and I got waitlisted at Case Western. And my wife got into Northeastern Law School, so she had started law school. But we decided, we weren't married yet. We decided we wanted to get married and have a family, and it wasn't going to work if I was in Cleveland and she was in Boston. So I gave that up, and I I went back to teaching. And then I wasn't too happy with that second job that I had teaching, so um, I left. And then I started doing some consulting work. I developed a bunch of products for a jewelry maker in Boston. And then Connie was started working as a real estate agent. And one day she said to me, why don't you become a home inspector? And I didn't even know what that was. I'd never heard the word before. And
Oh,
so I had one of the one of the home inspectors she knew took me around, and I loved it. I mean, it was everything that I like to do was, understanding mechanical systems um, and trying to solve problems. And actually, I mean, that's to me for because one of the questions you had was about, new people going into the business, and it's I don't see how you can go into this air quality testing unless you understand mechanical systems and building science, and so the home inspection background was just fabulous for me. And I would say if anybody wants to go into the air quality business, they should really get in touch with one of the local ASHI, American Society of Home Inspector chapters. They have ride-along programs, and that's how I got started. I went along with several people, and I learned, I took classes and I learned about it. But it's very, very important to know everything about the systems. I mean, I take, I open up boilers and air conditioning, air handlers, all kinds of things that I imagine that people who don't have that training would never do.
And how did the home inspection morph into my house is killing me and the indoor
Well,
environmental quality stuff?
well, I guess Connie said find out about home inspection, and then as I did that, I began to see the problems, and I took a class from Jack Spangler and oh, was it Jack somebody else? I forget it. At Harvard, in
John
extension
Samet?
school. No, no, I can't think of his name, but it was one of the courses they had on air quality. So that was my, beginning of the, getting into the technical thing. And then I got Thad Godish's book, which was fabulous. And
I'm glad you brought up that name. We had him on this show probably 20 years ago, and I,
yeah,
I don't know if he's around anymore.
no, he died.
He
Yeah,
passed away. So we'll
yeah,
have to pull that up and add that to the collection of life and time stories because he was very interesting as I recall.
yeah.
Cliff, did you want to jump in here?
Yeah. Jeff, have you always worked alone, or did you had you had any, um, other people working with you, or try to expand the business? Any
Yeah, a
thoughts
little.
about
Well,
doing that?
I've trained well, I gave classes. I gave two classes for 10 home inspectors, and a bunch of them actually went into doing air quality. So
Hmm.
I had I think it was about I don't remember, 3-day, 4-day course, and I rented microscopes, and I actually taught people how to do them, microscopy,
Right.
and how to take the samples. But I'd like to sell the business. You're
There you go.
familiar, but I would really, I guess I would like to see more people do their own microscopy, and that really takes some training.
Hmm.
But I don't see
Where
how you can. Yeah, go ahead,
where
Joe.
did you get your training for that?
Well, just really by, mostly by doing. I mean, I took a lot of classes too, but I just, there was some good books out there that I got with pictures of things, and started slowly. But I did
And
take a lot of classes to, um, it was Mike Muhlenberg, and uh-oh, his wife taught a bunch of classes. I took those things.
Well, then there's,
interesting.
I guess, Macron too, I
Yeah, I
guess,
never
these
went to
days.
Macron, although I did take a class from Jonathan.
It's okay.
Those
Uh-oh,
names
John.
are escaping us,
Yeah,
Jeff.
that's right. We're
I
getting
know
there.
who you mean too.
Oh,
Shane,
John,
Dr. John
John
Shane.
Shane. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yep.
That
Okay.
was great.
It'll come back to us. Let's start. What
Yeah.
about like new indoor environmental quality consultants, people that want to get into this business? I wonder if would you encourage people to do that? I mean, it's a tough business, Jeff. It's I don't know. Have you been able to make a decent living?
Oh yeah. No, it is. It's a tough business. I think, they're like one of the questions you wanted to ask me about was, what's the future of indoor air quality? And, I mean, or indoor environmental quality, as far as testing goes. And, it's like kind of a battle. we are fighting all these big industries just the way, the lead paint industry destroyed the reputation of doctors who said that lead was making people sick. And for years they denied that asbestos was a problem. And, the chemical industry is fighting tooth and nail against categorizing multiple chemical sensitivity as a real illness. And so and look at, I just read this book called Airborne by
Yep.
oops Carl Zimmer.
Yep.
And it's a great book, but it's a tragedy. That guy, that William Wells, he went crazy trying to convince people that viruses could be, aerosolized. And it wasn't until COVID, for God's sake, that people actually recognized, that viruses could travel distances. So there are like huge obstacles for this profession and this kind of work really to advance because there are so many huge financial interests fighting it.
Yeah, it's a tough business, but some people seem to do very well. I think part of it is like I'm here in this very rural area. There's not a whole lot of clientele in the area. You're up in the Boston area. You've got a
Right.
nice, big population of people that are probably many of them a little more aware of the potential, at least for indoor air quality issues. But I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I mean, it's tough. I mean, I think you would have to be in an area, where there's a bigger, population, a city for sure. I mean, that's how I started. People who start home inspections, it's terrible out in the middle of nowhere because it's very, very difficult. But the forgot the point I was going to make now.
Well, one
The
of the things I
EPA,
wanted.
well, one
Go
of
ahead.
I tell you the other problem, the other big problem about this whole business is that the EPA is saying, you don't ever need to sample. All you ever need to do is a visual inspection. And, because from my perspective, I take so many samples. In fact, the head of the EPA region, I forget whether 3 or 4, Boston, she came up to me one day at a show I had, and she just looked at me and she said, "You take too many samples." Well, I don't charge people for samples, so I take on an investigation, I'll take 15 or 20 samples, but that's how I find the problems. Most recently, I had a guy who has this like horrible neurological disease. It caused him to quit work, and I discovered that the pillow on his bed, he had a buckwheat pillow, and the buckwheat pillow was full of mold. And that was his favorite pillow, for whatever, 6 years or so.
And you
And
never would have found that without.
without you couldn't know that. What I do is I bang on the pillow and I see what comes out. I had a similar one with another buckwheat pillow. It was full of book lice, thousands and thousands of book lice in a pillow, and so many um, so many situations that you couldn't tell without a sample. I took a sample of a mattress one time, and because this kid was having bad asthma, he couldn't sleep in his new mattress. And the mattresses rarely have stuff from the outdoors because they're usually covered. And this mattress had pollen in it. It had some outdoor mold spores and a lot of insect droppings. And the giveaway was that there were pieces of wood char, fragments of wood char. So
Huh.
the mattress had been in a warehouse fire and it was put outside to dry because it got wet. And so the Bloomingdale's gave her money back.
Wow.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
Jeff, that kind of leads me to another question. I see. I don't know. It's a little frustrating for me. I see an emphasis on everything mold to the exclusion of other things like pollens and char and chemical emissions and so on. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the allergy profession has always looked at outdoor stuff and very little emphasis on indoor materials. So the I just had allergy testing, and they did the blood testing, and they tested me for Alternaria alternata, which is outdoor mold, and for Aspergillus fumigatus, which never grows indoors. So I think the industry is focused on what's going outdoors and, not on indoors. So um, mold is important. I think mold is very important. And of course, chemicals, VOC, also very important. Um, but it's expensive testing. People don't want to do testing for VOC. It's an expensive process. So it's limiting.
Cliff, I want to make sure you get a chance to jump in.
Yeah, no problem, Jeff. Let's change subjects. And what's the origin of your patch test? And if you could give the audience some
Oh,
examples of
right.
of how that process has
That's
helped you
yeah, a
solve
good
problems.
example. I love that one. That was the um, aluminum foil paper
Right,
towel test. You call it the
right,
patch test,
right.
but I was called to a law office because nobody could go into the conference room anymore. They used to eat their lunch in the conference room. And for 6 months, nobody could go in there. They felt nauseous. They had, all these symptoms. So I spent an hour and a half in this small room. There was a beautiful mahogany table there, and I was moving ceiling tiles and the carpet, and finally I sniffed the mahogany table, and
Table.
it reeked of butyric acid. So
Hmm.
butyric acid is produced by bacteria, and it's the smell of a dirty sponge.
Yeah.
So somebody wiped the table with a dirty sponge, and sort of quite by chance, there was a Yellow Pages, which is a phone book for the for
Not
those.
anymore.
People may not know anymore.
Yeah, there was a Yellow Pages that was sitting on that table, and I sniffed the top of the book and it had no odor, and then I sniffed the bottom and it had this terrible odor. So I went to one of the people in the office and I had him smell the top, and she said, "Oh, I don't smell anything." And I flipped it over and she went, "Oh, that's the smell." So that's when I realized that paper could, absorb the odor. And so that's how I devised the test, and it's been very useful for, a lot of people. So it's worked out to find sources.
Uh, Could you describe the test a little more for our audience? And
Oh,
also,
okay,
have you
sure.
had any, have you made any changes to the test over the year? Have you improved it at all?
You did with
Well,
you guys did, but yeah, no, you take a piece of paper towel and you have to, it's like a full sheet really. You fold it in half a couple of times, and let's say you want to test a floor for off-gassing of VOC, you put the paper towel on the floor and then cover it with a piece of aluminum foil and then tape around the perimeter, and then you label it. And I mean, I actually had one couple that were very scientific. They took, I think, about 30 different samples throughout their house because they had an odor they couldn't identify. And then they both sat down and they did it sort of independently blind, and they evaluated from 1 to 3 each of the samples. You open the foil and sniff the paper very quickly because the odor disappears pretty quickly. And they both voted that it was the one wall in the basement that had been painted that was the source of the smell. So it
Interesting.
can it can be very helpful. The aluminum foil prevents any odors from the room from getting in, so you're really sampling the odor emission from the surface. The problem with that is it's very ephemeral, so the odor can disappear quickly. Although I've used that technique, I have chemical sensitivity, and sometimes fragrances really bother me, and I always have paper towel with me. And so, like, I was actually on an airplane. I think I was flying to Italy, and there was such a strong fragrance odor in the bathroom, and I put the paper towel over my face to breathe through it, and it absorbed most of the chemical smell. But I'd been holding my breath so long at 30,000 feet. When I stepped out of the bathroom, I fainted, and one of the stewards caught me.
Wow.
But
Wow.
it's very effective. And, I'd say, for a few minutes, it will absorb a certain amount of chemical.
You know, I got a quick question before we go to halftime. This is from the audience. What's your secret cure? Do you have a cure for dirty sock syndrome in air handling units, heat pumps, or other? I guess mostly heat pumps.
Yeah. Well, it's, I guess Anytime you have moisture and dust, you're going to get microbial growth. So you get it on the coil and in the pan. So you get first organisms of bacteria, then you get, mold and yeast growing. So, and that's what makes the smell. So, you have to disinfect things to get rid of it. But the most important thing, I tell this to all of my clients, is the only way to, you can't stop the moisture in a humidifier or a dehumidifier or a air conditioning coil. The only way to prevent the growth is to prevent the dust. And so you have to use the best, filtration that you possibly can, and then you have to keep things clean. So you,
And make sure that filtration is properly sealed in,
oh, absolutely.
and
Yeah.
that's a big thing a lot of people miss, is making sure that
Yeah.
there's a good seal around that filter. All
Yeah.
right, Grayson, go ahead, Jeff. I'm sorry.
I was going to say oh, go ahead. I will do it afterwards.
All right, let's go to
A bigger
halftime,
topic.
Grayson.
Go ahead.
Our association sponsors are the Institute for Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification, IICRC, a nonprofit standards development and certifying body for the cleaning and restoration industry at iicrc.org. The Environmental Information Association, EIA's multidisciplinary membership collects, generates, and disseminates information concerning environmental and occupational health hazards in the built environment at eia-usa.org. The IICRC, a nonprofit standards development and certifying body for the cleaning and restoration industry, iicrc.org. The Restoration Industry Association, the oldest and largest nonprofit professional trade association dedicated to providing leadership and promoting best practices through advocacy, standards, and professional qualifications for the restoration industry at restorationindustry.org. Industry sponsors are Particles Plus, feature-rich particle counters and air quality instrumentation. Count on us, particlesplus.com. Tramex Meters, innovation in moisture detection and humidity monitoring systems since 1974 at tramexmeters.com. EMSL Analytical Inc., providing high-quality, full-service laboratory services since 1981. EMSL.com. We're back with Jeff May, the second half of our interview here. Jeff, I want to talk a little about your books. Maybe I got this wrong. Do you have 4 now, or was there 5?
Well, there's 2 editions of My House is Killing Me, so that makes it 5.
And what My House is Killing Me was kind of, if I recall correctly, was kind of geared towards consumers, right? I mean, the homeowners, and how to determine what kind of issues they may be having in their homes. What are some of the most common important tips you have for consumers?
Well, as I said, the filtration for the air conditioning system is really that's really key. And I tell all of my clients, dust is the devil. You can't have dust in the house. You have to, clean, 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 because dust is food. Dust, it's skin scales, it's protein. There's pollen grains and starch granules. There's cellulose, and if you look, like I often will do, I'll go in the closets and take the junk out of the floor, and you can see the dust on the baseboard. It's kind of yellow and very, very splotchy. And if you look at house dust, normally it's just gray and kind of homogeneous. But when it's splotchy like that, you take a sample, you see that it's all bug poop. So, the book lice eat pollen, they eat, starch, they eat they're sort of omnivorous, and then their droppings are allergenic. And then you have dust mites and silverfish and, spiders, all of these things that have have allergenic droppings. And so eventually house dust gets converted to allergen. And so it's critical to keep things clean.
Keep it clean. One of the healthy housing principles.
Yep, yep.
And keep filtration. And um, That's splotching. Have you ever found that? I had a job, a big job in a school, and it had that kind of yellowish. It didn't look like mold, but when we sampled it, it turned out to be aspergillus mold. I don't know if you've ever run across anything like that or not. I don't know whether it was growing on like old cigarette smoke or whatever it was, but
Oh, well, yeah, well, I've mice leave urine trails wherever they go, and they leave pheromones in the urine. So when the mouse female's in estrus, they know that, and the alpha mouse has a pheromone. So those sort of pinkish red trails everywhere, mouse urine, they wet the dust, and I've taken samples from the trails, and it's full of aspergillus. And I looked at a place. Gee, there was some black spots at the bottom of the stairs, and it looked like there were splotches. Someone had spilled a Coke or something. It was like, there were kids in the house, and I took a sample, and it was all mite droppings. So there was mold growing in the spots, and then mites came along and ate the mold.
it's
So
like a big chain. You
it
know,
is. It's a huge chain, ecologically, and you want to stop it right, right at the beginning. Um, we're getting back to what I was trying to say earlier about the air conditioning. I did a sort of a little survey. I wrote a paper on this years ago, and it was in that one of the books that got published from New York State. But I looked at I took the data on air conditioning from 300 houses. I called them control houses, like where if they had central air conditioning or not. And so 19% of the homes that I had looked at of those 300 had central air conditioning. And I did the same thing for 600 homes that I had looked at where people were having respiratory problems. And 38% about of those houses were had central air. So it was twice the likelihood if you had central air conditioning of having, respiratory problems. And I mean, it's so simple, it's so obvious, it's so, what's going on. And again, this is the battle, air quality people are facing, that the air conditioning industry is like fighting tooth and nail for the truth to get out. Uh, Window air conditioners often are full of mold. They used to have white bead polystyrene insulation, and the way they solved the mold problem was now they have black and white beads, so you can't see the mold anymore when you look
huh.
inside. And I mean, the mini splits are going like crazy everywhere, with heat pumps and saving energy. So every heat pump that I look at practically has mold. But the winner was this house where this guy was so ill with his neurological issues. His mini split was a year old, and I took a swab from the blower blade, and it was all cladosporium.
You know,
He
I,
had
I
used it for one season.
those need cleaned regularly, and people don't. Well, they put them in, and nobody tells them
That's
you've
right.
got to have this cleaned every six
That's
months
right.
or every year or
No, but
whatever.
they couldn't sell him because it's this guy. He has seven heads. Well, the least you can pay for cleaning is $200, and if you have to clean it every season, it's 1,400 for cleaning.
Yep,
It's crazy, but that
yep.
nobody understands that.
But it needs done. You've got to do it. I mean, you may save money on your electric, but you're going to have to pay for cleaning.
Exactly. That's it. It's that energy versus, health conditions.
It's a trade-off. You got to do it. All right, Cliff. I want to make sure you get a chance to jump in again.
Yeah, let's
Thank you.
what was your most rewarding project that you ever did and why?
That's a great. There've been so many, but I tell you
Right.
the one that's sort of most, I guess, most interesting was that I got a call from a guy who had just moved into this house, and he said he'd been in the house for 3 weeks, and for the last week he hadn't slept a minute at night. His right lung was vibrating at night, And he was just, when you're sleep deprived, it's very difficult. He was acting almost crazy, and I thought, gee, I don't want to get into this one. The guy is, clearly nuts. So I said, okay, I like to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. So so we made an appointment and I went over there and he was acting totally crazed. I mean, I walked in the door. He wanted to know if the air handler was too close to the wall and he was on and on. Finally, I said, "Look, what happened? What changed, in the last week?" And he said, "I installed a floor, a hardwood floor in the attic." So we went up into the attic and they had put this beautiful tongue and groove oak floor in the attic. And I happened to be standing still, and he was walking around. And every time he took a step, I could feel the vibration of the floor. And it was a damped harmonic oscillator. It's like when you a diving board, it would, oscillate and then die down into smaller and smaller oscillations. And and then it hit me what had happened was when they put the floor down, they had created basically a membrane, like a drum head. And whenever there was a pressure change, that the floor would oscillate. And the master bedroom was obviously underneath the attic floor. And so when the floor oscillated, the air pressure oscillated in his bedroom. And it was a very well ventilated attic. So if airplanes would go by, the wind would blow, trucks would drive by, everything changes the air pressure. And for some weird reason, his right lung could detect the vibration, the change in air pressure.
How
So
did you
how we
uh,
solved the problem. I
how did you
just
solve
Yeah, well,
it?
he hadn't unpacked, like a membrane has a frequency. I forget what it's called now, but it has this particular, resonance frequency. Um, so I said he hadn't unpacked anything yet, and he had all his books still. And I said, look, just put all your books on top of the floor in the, near the bedroom, and that would change the frequency of the thing shaking, and he slept like a baby that night. It was fine. That solved the problem.
Well, hey, Jeff, I've never heard of this before, so I want to throw it out. It's a text from our audience. How does rock salt residue entering the indoor environment affect indoor air quality? I never thought about that.
That's it. Well, yeah, it's interesting that when they put a lot of salt on the roads in the wintertime, and now when you drive down the road and it's a sunny day, there's this haze of fog, and it's all salt crystals. And I've looked at that under the microscope, and they're like 3 microns or so inside, and each salt crystal is a perfect cube. It's just like a cube of salt on a microscopic level.
Huh.
And so if if your salt happens to be in a in an environment where there's a lot of allergens, then that can get into the air. I mean, it's one of the in the wintertime I see soot particles from diesel engines and from oil burners, and salt particles from road salt. And actually, one of the things that I've battled for, and we wrote a whole chapter on this in the new "My House Is Killing Me" on surrogate allergens, and that is something that it's a battle I've been fighting, and nobody is really accepting it, and it's a shame. So the one surrogate allergen that people have accepted, the medical community, is the um, uh, latex allergen on cornstarch granules. So there are a lot of people who, they would anaphylax if they get exposed to latex allergen. And the donning powder and the gloves and condoms and balloons, it was cornstarch always. And so the cornstarch was be in contact with the rubber, and then the allergens from the rubber would get onto the cornstarch. And I know when they renovated, Brigham and Women's Hospital here, they had a huge problem. 80 nurses were permanently disabled, and they found huge concentrations of latex allergen on top of the ceiling tiles, all from snapping the gloves, the latex gloves. So, imagine a lot of people use corn-based kitty litter, and you take air samples in the house, you find a lot of, cornstarch granules. Well, the cats are peeing on on the litter, and so now they're going to be allergens from the cat on the cornstarch granules. So now imagine in an air conditioning system, you have this puddle in the pan of water, and it's full of, biodegradable stuff. There are bacteria and mold and yeast, and now in the wintertime, the stuff all dries out and it gets aerosolized. So you can have rust particles as surrogate allergens. You can have cellular anything that's sitting in a puddle of microbial enzymes. Basically, the allergens are mostly enzymes. So
Interesting. Cliff, I'm sorry. Cliff, did you want to jump in? Because I got a couple. I got a text here from the audience, and I got a couple others.
Yeah, actually, I thought one of those texts was important. It was further up the list, Joe, but about what the text um, is asking you is how do you handle customers that might have a dime size uh, spot that is suspected mold, and they go on the internet and they start reading about it, and they
God,
start panicking and so on and so forth, and they don't have any symptoms yet, but how do you handle that?
tell them to buy the mold survival guide. No, I mean
Perfect,
it's
perfect.
nothing. Yeah, when people have mold in the windows and there's so many of these, situations, and they read that stuff on the internet, and it's just mostly nonsense. Like, my favorite thing is this. I think it's in the um NAF, what is it? Not NAFTA. What is it? Yeah, one of the association.
NADCA,
No,
National,
no. It's for remediators. The executive director, and I don't know if they've changed this or not. He said you can't use bleach to kill mold
okay.
because mold gets angry and it makes more mycotoxins. I mean, it's like the stupidest thing you could ever imagine, but that's what's out there. So you try and educate people. And what I tell people over and over is, you don't have to worry too much about mold unless there's airflow. In other words, it can be a refrigerator that has mold in the pan. It can be a humidifier or a dehumidifier. As long as you have airflow and you have microorganisms growing there, there's the possibility, to get ill. But the when I what the first time I really clued into this surrogate allergen problem was I investigated an air quality problem in a computer facility. It was 11th floor of an office building, and I went into the server room, and there was nothing in the room but servers. It was not that big a room. There was a metal grid floor for the wires, and no people ever really go in there. So I took an air sample, and there was like next to nothing in the air. The only thing that was in the air was these respirable rust particles. And I had a lot of trouble breathing in that space. And it really was a very curious thing. But, well, what happened was they have a humidifier in there. They kept the relative humidity at 50% to avoid, sparks. And so I never got to see the thing because it was too dangerous in that space. But my assumption was that the humidifier had water and the pan was rusted and there was probably stuff growing in there. And then the rust particles had the enzymes, digestive enzymes from whatever was growing in there. And, I just it was a big problem to breathe. And so that was my introduction to thinking about that surrogate allergen.
You mentioned humidifiers, and I think that's an important topic right now, Jeff. Can you give us some tips on what you recommend? I mean, I'm in the mountains of Pennsylvania here. My relative humidity gets down to 20, 25%. What do you recommend for humidifiers?
Yeah, I'm at 10%.
Oh yeah, well
Yeah,
I've been running a
yeah,
humidifier, so that might be
yeah.
helping
Oh,
me.
okay. Yeah, well, there are all kinds of problems with the different types of humidifiers. So the ultrasonic humidifiers take the water and create very small droplets, smoke-sized
Right.
droplets, and whatever's in the water, that's what gets aerosolized. So you get mineral dust and things. But so that was one of my first humidifiers, and one day I was having trouble breathing, And so I took the water from the humidifier and I centrifuged it. And then I looked at the bottom of the liquid at the bottom of the water, and it was full of these microorganisms with tails swimming around. It was like flagella, and I couldn't believe it. They're like 5 microns in size with tails. And I thought, how is these things in the water? I went to the water department. They looked at me like I was crazy. And I found out later that they were Chytridiomycota. So they are motile spores. There's a type of mold that grows in the soil, and the spores have these flagella, and that's what caused the Irish potato famine. It was something like something infestans, I forget, but that it was very wet soil, and then these uh, molds destroyed all all the roots. So so uh, that kind of that ultrasonic was out. Of course, you can use distilled water. I've had clients that argue with me about they can use distilled water. That's probably okay.
It,
And
it,
then the
it, it is okay.
yeah,
And I think what happens is sometimes people get they think purified water is better, and it's not. And what happens is, with distill, they boil it, and it removes a lot of
right,
the alkalinity and so
sure.
on and so forth. And that's primarily, I think, why they use it in CPAPs and stuff is
Yeah, that's
distilled.
right. Exactly. Yeah. I actually looked at a guy's CPAP and there was mold growing in his humidifier.
Yeah.
But so the other kind, these evaporative ones, this is like so hard to believe. Like, so everybody in this business knows that, Stachybotrys grows on wet paper, right?
Right, right.
So what do you know that a lot of these evaporative humidifiers had a paper pad in there, and I've seen them covered with Stachybotrys. In fact, I took one in to Harriet Burge to look at once. But so now you can put in some antimicrobial, and I guess that helps. So, but the safest one I think is the warm mist. So it boils the water, and the doctors go crazy when they hear boiling water, and they think it's dangerous. But the amount of boiling water in one of those things, it's like, I don't know, a quarter of a cup or something. It's really, and if it turned over, it wouldn't do anything to anybody. So it boils the water, it mixes it with air, and what comes out is a very fine mist of water droplets, and those things work great. You boil the water, it's sterile.
uh, Jeff, let me ask real quick, for people that do remediation, you deal with these issues all the time. I wonder if you could give a couple tips or maybe tell us about some of the common mistakes made during remediation.
Yeah, sure. Well, I find the biggest thing, and just recently, really, is the whole basement was remediated, and they left the fiberglass at the band sill, and the top of the foundation was filthy with mouse poop, and so that seems to be one of the most common things that the remediators omit. It's the top, the top of the foundation. And then I always recommend that the framing get paint sealed after it's cleaned. And sometimes, they don't do that. And when I take a tape sample from a joist that's been, remediated, I can still find hyphae and spores there. I mean, I can honestly say that almost if a home hasn't been dehumidified in the basement since the day of construction, there's going to be some mold growth, and it's non-visible. It's just in the grain of the wood. Usually, it's Penicillium or Aspergillus, and often there's microarthropod, mold-eating mite activity there. So I just you can't see it. I just say give it a light coating of spray paint to encapsulate it. So I always recommend that because if
Any
you
particular type of paint you recommend?
No, it really is irrelevant. It just, mold will grow on anything. I've seen, mold growing on the outsides of houses with, mildew-side paint. If you take a tape sample from the outside of a house, there's sap from the trees and pollen grains and all kinds of, debris. And the mold can grow in that. It doesn't matter what's in the paint. So in a basement, the only thing that counts is controlling the relative humidity. You can never let it get over 50%. You'll never have any kind of problems.
All right. Cliff, I want to make sure you get a chance. We've got about 5 minutes left, unless you can stay over a little bit, Jeff.
I think I'm good, Joe. I think.
All right, let me go back to the mini split questions here because there were a couple people who had commented. What? Thanks for great stories. Mini split cleaning. Can a homeowner easily clean or replace a filter often to prevent IEQ problems? And then Linda Wigington mentioned here below that
Hi, Linda.
if she had a little different take on cleaning the mini splits, but I know she updated it a little bit, so I'm a little confused. But I think the point being that if you have a cleaner, that you should be concerned about making sure your indoor environment is clean by maybe running a air filter, which will also help with lowering the number of times you need to clean your mini split. But I may have misinterpreted that a little bit. Um, so I guess the question is, are there any other strategies for dealing with these mini splits? Because we're going to see them more and more and more,
Yeah.
Jeff.
No, well, the the problem is really the result of the sort of the war between sort of energy and air quality. I mean, all people think about these days, or mostly, it's just saving energy. And so the seasonal efficiency ratio was set so high for these mini splits that the manufacturers, the way they saved on energy consumption was they reduced the ampacity of the barrel blower. So the barrel blower has no, it has no power. You can't put a filter on a mini split, and so it's like a little insect screen. And so the dust builds up uh, on the blower blades and on the supply vanes and everything. The relative humidity is very high of the air that's been cooled, and so it's inevitable. So the only way to prevent it is not to have dust. But in this case, which is different from central air, is that you can't have a filter on a mini split. And so what happens is if you, like say, if you live in a very pristine environment, you have leather furniture and you have hardwood floors, and you don't have dogs and cats or children, and you don't have 10 people living in the house, then there's not a lot of dust, and maybe you can get away with running the mini split and only cleaning it every few 2 or 3 years. If you have carpets and a lot of people and pets, the dust builds up very, very quickly, and you may have to clean it every year. In the beginning, there was no way to clean these things, and so you had to, take them apart, and they were charging $500 to do that. Now they have a system, and you can see them on YouTube. They have a lot of ads where they put a big plastic bag under the mini split, and then they rinse it down with whatever cleaning fluid, and it all goes into this bucket, and it's all black. I mean, it's just incredible what comes out of these things because it grows so fast. There's no filtration.
I had mine cleaned and they did that same process. They did a
Yeah.
pretty good job, but the one thing that they don't do, and I think is a very important tip for anybody in this business, you've got to pull out a flashlight and shine it on that blower and on that coil. If you don't use a flashlight, you're just
Oh
looking
no.
at it with
Yeah.
the natural light. You're not,
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. It's very hard to see in there, but that's the way to check. But I mean, for people who have bad, allergy problems, they might have to clean these things, every year. But I guess what Linda was saying, if you run air purifiers, then you have less dust in the air. That can certainly, that'll certainly help. I mean, the less, the cleaner the air, the less likely it is to have that kind of problem.
I think the other important point she makes is that they need to drain correctly, and oftentimes they're not installed with that angle on it so that the water drains out of there properly.
Yeah, that's possible. I haven't seen that.
All right, we're just about out of time here, Jeff, but before we go, I want to kind of like sum it up with what is you've been doing this for over 30 years. What are some of the biggest lessons learned over that 30-year period?
Don't fix anything. Don't, you fix it and it's yours. No, I tried to change a light bulb that was broken once. I stood on a chair and the chair collapsed and I tore the shelf down. So I guess don't, and then read, I think honestly, read the books, read I mean, it's all what we've put down was really teaching, that's what I try and do in all my work. And that's what we do in all of the written things it's critical. Read, read for people wanting to do the work. They ought to go, IAQA, deal with IAQA, take the classes. It's great.
And how do you see the future of this industry, Jeff?
It's sad. I mean, because there's, there's no real, university or training for this, for people. And as I said, there are all of these huge sort of financial interests out there that, don't want to admit to the problems that exist. I mean, the fiberglass, Man-Made Manufacturers Association, they just state, mold can't grow on fiberglass. Well, that's right. It can't, but that's the dust in the fiberglass. So, I mean, that's what we're dealing with. Uh, so it's going to be a big uphill battle.
I thought I saw a turning point with COVID. People started to at least become more aware. And like you mentioned, Carl Zimmer's book, Airborne, I mean, people became more aware. But then once COVID kind of faded from the front pages, it seemed like indoor air quality kind of went along with it. But I don't
Yeah,
know what your
that's
thoughts are.
true. Yeah, that was they first recognized that, was the physicians first recognized that, airborne transmission of virus because of COVID. It was so that was a big step. But it's just there are too many impediments, I think. It's very, I mean, the EPA is saying don't take samples, don't take samples, do visual inspection. And how do you find out where the problems are if you don't take, source samples?
Before we go, is there anything we missed that you'd like to add? Cliff, I want to make sure you get a chance to.
I just want to thank Jeff. That's all for joining us
Well, thanks for the
and for
opportunity, guys.
the tips over the years and the patch test. And yeah, it's helped me a lot.
Good. Yeah,
Jeff,
it's a
anything
great
you'd
show.
like to add?
No, you're doing a great job. It's wonderful.
We appreciate it. We appreciate you joining us. Oh, where can people get your books?
Amazon.
Amazon, just put Jeff May in there. My house is killing me, or
Yeah, that's it.
all right. Jeff May, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks,
And
Joe.
we will certainly hopefully run into you again up at summer camp or somewhere along the way. And we appreciate you joining us here on IAQ Radio.
Right. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Cliff. Pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, this is Radio Joe Hughes saying thanks so much to this week's guest, Jeff May. Always great to talk with Jeff, and it's been too long. I also want to thank my co-host, the Z-Man Cliff Slotnick, our engineer, Grayson Gone Fish and Fisher at the controls. Most importantly, our loyal audience and sponsors. We'll be back in 2 weeks with the next episode of IAQ Radio Plus.
For IAQ Radio, I'm Spike Reel saying thanks for listening.